Happy All Hallows Eve to everybody. Once again, it's me, Jara, doing another Patreon live Q&A. As you know, I have a Patreon account, and various members of the Patreon account who are my patrons send in questions every month, and I give them an old try to come up with some answers. First one. If you could be any of the Halloween costumes you were growing up, which one would it be? My favorite Halloween costume was one my dad made for me. I want to say I was around maybe 11 or so. It was a robot. He made it out of a huge glue barrel and some huge pipes and a bit of red, I want to say like filter for the visor for the top. And it just looked so cool. It looked imposing and amazing and all powerful. And when we went to the bowling costume contest before Halloween that year, I won first prize, which was an amazing, at the time, 2-player cassette tape, basically a boombox. And I was just so thrilled with the idea of being able to actually record other media that I had and then make a copy of it. But when trick-or-treating with it, it was so large that I kept falling and rolling down the street. So instead, I went back home and put on some, nice slacks and a vest and went trick-or-treating as a lawyer instead. But being a robot, I always think about that. Being a robot, you have a desired function. Someone has given you that function, whether it's, a creator, if you believe that, or the code itself institutes a function. There's no suffering, no inherent suffering, because you don't have any sort of emotion. You are programmed to do a task. You are immortal in terms of as potentially being immortal. And your goal is to execute that task to the betterment of those who made you. And I like that in a way. I like if I could be a robot who's working on cures for different diseases, or a robot who's navigating out in the cosmos like SETI to see if, in fact, there are extraterrestrial life. Next question. What's the funniest thing that ever happened to you? Well, I know the robot Halloween story is pretty fun, but my other all-time favorite story involves a recess at lunch and a period in my life where I was a cult leader unwittingly for about 7 minutes. What happened was, at the beginning of class, the playground time that kids have before school starts, a bunch of my friends were just being jack-offs and kicking each other. That was the thing we did. We just got up and we sort of lightly kicked each other on the baseball field, and that was considered fun back then. And one of the kids, Jeffrey Neller, I believe, turned to me and said, "I'm going to get you at lunch," meaning he was going to continue this game along with the other dumb friends of mine at the time. I thought nothing of it. I went back to 6th grade, and this real intimidating bully kid from my class, I remember his name still, Lorne, whispered over to me, "Hey man, I got your back." And I thought, I have no clue what you're talking about, buddy. And things started buzzing around my classroom, around the school itself, and by the time lunch started, you just saw people looking at me expectantly, and it's this sort of vibrating feeling. And when the period where lunch ended and the lunch recess began, they all ran to the playground area, formed off into a line, and had 4 dudes come up to me saying that they would fight on my behalf. Jeffrey was nowhere to be found. He had heard about this and ran to the principal. And at that point, Bull, who was one of the big security guards / maintenance guys of the school, walked over to where the kids were going, and I saw trouble as soon as I saw it, and I ran like a little kid. I ran to the boys' bathroom, and I kid you not, people ran with me. And so there was about maybe 25, 30 people just cramming a little tiny elementary school bathroom. And sure enough, Bill found me and took me to the principal's office, and we quickly explained that it was all just a stupid misunderstanding. But it's crazy, the idea that a bunch of kids could be so, without thinking, so energetically wrapped around one person for such a dumb reason. Next question. What's a memory someone told you that you should have still, but you've forgotten all about it? Well, I was briefly dating, and I mean briefly dating. I was more doing a show with and then went on one date with a very lovely woman who told me about maybe 2 years ago that she still had a poem I wrote about Hitler's tree, and though life had been uncertain and there was a lot of ups and downs in her life, she still kept that poem fondly and thought of me. And it took me a while to remember that I actually, one, had done this, and two, why was it about Hitler's tree? And then I realized I had spent like about 2 hours today looking it up. It turns out the school I went to, USC in Los Angeles, there was a huge donor, and you can see a lot of his embellishments and endowments on a main thoroughfare in USC. His last name was von Kleinsmith. And yes, like the name suggests, he was, to be kind, very sympathetic with the Nazi regime, and some might say allied heavily with the Nazi regime. And there's a rumor that persists that Hitler, as a gift to von Kleinsmith, allowed a special tree to be planted in his name on the grounds of the campus. And rumor is it's still there. And that's probably why I wrote the poem, because we were both USC grads. It's just weird. Weird little thing. Next question. What's a quick getaway for you and Stacy? Right now, I haven't been the best at that. I've been good at fun little weekend type adventures in the city, going to, really fun candy stores or trips to new restaurants, or just exploring the city at large. But when we have time and when money permits, we definitely like to do a weekend in Atlantic City or a trip back to Santa Barbara where we got married. Santa Barbara's a really lovely place. What is your favorite Halloween show? Well, of course, like my friend Anna mentioned, hers is definitely Garfield, and I love Garfield. Garfield's a really fun one. I would still to this day repeat Garfield going, candy, 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 candy. And I do that when I zoom in and out of a picture of young Stacy as a witch on her Halloween as a special girl. I am very scared and was very scared as a child, so I didn't watch a lot of Halloween things. But aside from that, I really loved the It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown Peanuts, a live series that just had Linus believing so hard in something that couldn't be proven, and he never gave up, and he just kept waiting year after year for the great pumpkin to come. Last question. What's your favorite books of all time? My favorite books, I talk about this one all the time, is 101 Psychological Experiments. And the main title is called Astonish Yourself by Paul Roger Droy. I believe. I'm not good at French. The book, you can open it random. It's really psychological games that you give yourself, all for philosophical purposes. One is pinch yourself, one is attend the circus, one is go jogging in a graveyard. And I think by the nature of all these different indicators, they unspool your mind from the basic concepts of what you are led to believe and the main ideas of existence, of identity, of what's taboo and what's not. But not in just really cheeky, flippant ways, but in actually life-preserving sentiments. Calling your name in an empty room and hearing that sound over and over again. Try that one. Second book I love is a book called Wishcraft by Barbara Sher. It seems a little woo-woo, but it is basically the blueprint upon which all artisty woo-woo stuff came from, with the exception of Shakti Gawan and her creative visualization book. Barbara Sher basically talks about how if you want X, you have to make a spider's web of things that you need to do to get to X. And my favorite part about her book is the concept of barnstorming. Barnstorming, of course, back in the old 1800s, and even before that, were when a community, to welcome perhaps a new bride and groom into their family, would spend a whole day just bringing all materials and things together to make a house for that new family. And I think that still can exist today. You can grab up to 12 people in a room, all with varying skill levels, some of them, from completely disparate careers, and they all need something that somebody else in the room needs. I think that's powerful. I think it should happen more often, and I really want to implement my own salons of that starting next year. The last book, as a writer, as a kid who's shy, my favorite was Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary. In that book, it surmises the ideal mentorship any kid or I myself would want. Writing these series of letters over and over and over again to a favorite children's book author while he's living his life and dealing with the uncertainties of teenage years, of having his lunch stolen, finding creative ways to stop that. The writer writes a couple of times, but the mere fact of writing, of this kid writing his mind and continuing to exercise his muscles, just proves to himself that that is enough and that keeps him going. And the mere act of actually appealing to this mentor makes him better. My question's for you. How do you stay connected in this current event and these current worlds without losing your spark? Second question. If you could travel back in time to the very first Thanksgiving, Plymouth Rock, all that stuff, with Squanto and the Native Americans, what food not currently there would you introduce to them for the event and why? Love you guys.